What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Tierlist, and I really appreciate you guys joining me today so that you guys can witness my first rite of passage as a YouTuber, make a complete fool of myself as a raid player. I'm going to try and make a tier list for Element Fission. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to say that I don't know a bit about this game. You know what I mean? I've been grinding it pretty hard, and I have quite a bit of experience with gacha games and these like hero collectors, whatever you want to call them. So I kind of understand how these kits work, even though for a lot of these champions, I haven't fully upgraded them yet. I have messed around with some of them, but I try to read the kit and kind of conceptualize in my brain how that would be useful. Now, I thought the fun part would be the Element Fission community is, I would say probably like 99.9% Summoner's War player, or Summoner's Wars. I actually don't know. Is it Summoner's War or Summoner's Wars? Anyway, 99% of the community is coming over from there, and I see a lot of people talking about, you know, the one-to-one recreations of which character is which in that game and how good they are. And as a raid player, I feel completely like outside of the loop. You know what I mean? The cool kids club is happening over here, and I'm kind of over here doing my own thing. But like every other YouTuber worth their salt, I figured eventually I'd throw down and try and make a tier list. And if nothing else, maybe it'll entertain you guys to see how wrong I am, or, you know, maybe I'm right on the money. One thing I did do is I tried to abstain from watching any other tier list videos, not because I don't like the creators. You know, somebody linked me a Juby video. I believe that's how you say his name, Juby, when they were trying to help me with building a team. And I appreciate the help. I just didn't watch the tier video, mostly because I didn't want there to be a sort of deference to authority, and the idea that I didn't want other YouTubers' opinions to skew mine too much, and then next thing you know, my tier list is just a one-to-one recreation of theirs, right? Same thing with Jay Gigs. He's actually the person who put me onto this game because he's also a raid creator, and much like him, I was feeling kind of disenfranchised with raid, and then I came over, I seen him talking about Element Fission. I said, you know what, why don't I give that a try? What's the harm, you know what I mean? So here we are with that. Couple other announcements. I am planning on starting streaming soon. Now, I don't know exactly what date or what the times will be yet, so I'll keep you guys posted. I actually do have one stream cataloged on the channel right now, but it was kind of more of a proof of concept than anything else, whereas moving forward, I actually would like to kind of try to like make a schedule about it, you know what I mean? Whatever it may be, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays from 4 to 8 or my time or Eastern time or whatever, right? So without further ado, let's crack into it and get this started. So I am going to have Element Fission up on my other monitor just so I can kind of remind myself some of the kits, but I don't need to remind myself about any of the steel wings. I know exactly what each of them do, and we're just going to go through real quick. Water Steel Wing, I'll be honest, I had him in A tier in my mind earlier, but then once I changed up my heavy metal team, I'm going to put Water Steel Wing in B tier. I think the fact that his passive makes it so that every one of his hits is reducing enemy turn meter is absolutely insane. I just find that, you know, in the one place where I thought he would really shine, he's one of the mons that I took out. So I don't really know exactly where else I would put him. He's got a lot of turn meter control, but it's all single target. So even things like tunnel and PvP, I'm just, you know, I think he's solid. And I think if you really, really want to use him in heavy metal, I think that the team will do fine. But I think there's better options, and his number one home is kind of gets taken away from him as you get higher up in stages. I'm gonna do the same thing, basically the same thing with the Fire Steel Wing. His kit reads really, really well. You know what I mean? He's got the attack up and heal. He's got the 3-hitter with Incurable, and then he's got the 2-hitter with the attack down, right? So he's bringing attack down and attack up, healing and placing Incurable, tons of multi-hits. You could probably use him for a little while in Death Lab, but I don't see him being used that often, even in, you know, endgame teams, even middle of the road teams. I don't see him being used a ton. And that's mostly because of another version of him coming up a little bit later. Green Steel Wing, however, I'm going to put in S tier. He's bringing turn meter control on his A2, speed down on his A2, his A3, attack up, defense up. And on his A1, even if you build him super tanky, he puts damage over time, or has a chance to put damage over time, so he can still get damage out. I think Green Steel Wing, absolutely insane. Light Steel Wing, I'm going to put in A tier, although I think there's a good argument to be made in S tier, right? Because he is just he's kind of like just Fire Steel Wing, but maybe better. They all have the same A2, where it's the multi-hitter with Incurable. His A1, he's hitting twice, which is, again, multi-hitters for things like Death Lab, super great. But he's also bringing the fact that he can use that A1 on allies to heal them, which I think is just better, along with his A3, where he's removing all debuffs and placing immunity. That's really nice for those death stacks that the Death Lab boss. Basically, Light Steel Wing is the reason why Fire Steel Wing is not an A. Although, I suppose you could probably put both of them in A, because you could probably run a team with both of them. I just haven't been building one around that. Now, finally, we have the Dark Steel Wing. He's the only one that I'm actually not super familiar with, but as I kind of look through his kit, defense down and damage over time on a 2-hitter on his A3. Again, this is the only one that's different from all the other Steel Wings, where his A2 is an AoE that places a 2-turn speed down and then absorbs 10% of the enemy's action bar. And then he's got a buff strip on his A1. I'm going to go ahead and put him in A tier as well. I think I haven't seen a lot of people using him, and I haven't gotten my hands on him. But defense down, speed down, action bar decrease or absorption, which helps him cycle through his kit, along with the damage over time and the buff strip. I mean, his kit just feels like it's too good to not place anywhere. Like, I don't see how I could place him lower than A tier, personally. That's just me, though. All right, moving on along, we've got the Clockworks, and starting with the Water Clockwork, I'm going to put him in B tier. I don't care. I was in chat the other day, and I mentioned Water Clockwork, and I mentioned him as a meme. I know it was kind of meant to be a meme, but I'm going to be honest with you. I see the potential. On his A3, he's bringing 2 damage over time for 2 turns. Now, the A3 is a 4-turn cooldown, but he grants himself another turn immediately afterwards, which really means it's more of like a 3-turn cooldown. And I think for AoE poison combust teams, it could be arena is kind of pie in the sky. I can think of an arena team that I would put together to try and get that, along with like Light Music Queen, Tree Annihilator, and maybe Tree Ghost Captain, as just like turn off everybody's abilities, just throw a bunch of poisons up, combust them, you know what I mean? And the enemy's only hitting you with A1s, which means that you can build your team super tanky, and all of your damage is going to be coming through on the damage over time, right? Again, it's a bit of a meme, but this guy, I see the vision. I see the vision with the Water Clockwork. Fire Clockwork, I'm going to put in B tier as well, mostly because I see a lot of people use him. I just don't use him myself. And the only reason I don't is because I don't like his A3. I know that, at least the way it reads, and again, this can be kind of chunky sometimes, is that the A3 is attack up, crit up, and healing overturn. So that's nice. However, he doesn't give all 3 of those buffs, because if he did, I'd probably put him in A tier. You need to stack a lot of luck on him. And then he also kind of wants to be a single target nuker. So I see the vision, but I haven't tested him a ton. And the kit, you'll find with me that I'm very biased towards randomness inside of a kit. If there's a kit and there's a bit of randomness, In my opinion, I don't love it, because when I'm building a team, I want consistency more than anything else. And I know that the argument is that, well, if you build him with enough luck, he'll give out all 3 buffs, but then it's kind of taking away from his nuking potential. I'm not going to say he's bad. Like I said, I see a lot of people use him. I'm not really feeling him. You know what I mean? So we're going to move on to the tree one. And the tree one is, I think I kind of want to put him in A or B tier. Let's put him in B tier. I see he gives all allies attack up and speed up, and he grants himself invincible. And then he's got an A2 that ignores defense, and the same A1 as everybody else, where he's reducing enemy speed and he's scaling off speed himself. Now, the nice part is he's giving himself a speed boost, which is also, he's bringing his own buffs, right? Attack up and speed up, albeit on a 4-turn cooldown, but he's also giving himself a turn of invincible. So as a single target nuker for maybe somewhere like the arena, where you want to like slow it down and methodically pick off one after the other, I guess I could see it. I also think that he's pretty good in Boxing Club, but much like Fire Steel Wing, he's good in Boxing Club until you get something better and then he gets replaced, right? I mean, even single target right now using Tree Sharpshooter over him, although I think I could make an argument for myself where I could bring him and then maybe move a couple of people around to make a faster team with him as my single target nuker. But I haven't really tested him out enough. It's just kind of eyeballing the kit to see what I think. All right, next we have the Light Clockwork, and the Light Clockwork, he has an interesting passive where basically if they have more maximum HP than you, they're dealing more damage. If they have a higher attack than you, you're taking less damage. And if if their defense is higher than yours, then whatever your defense is, I guess 85% of it you're ignoring from them. That's kind of how I read that passive. And then he's got the A2 where he's hitting once, giving himself a speed up, and then the damage is based off of speed. And then as well with the A1, same thing, speed down, and it's scaling off attack and speed. I'm going to tentatively put him in A tier. I have one, I haven't built him out, but again, I think especially for dungeons, as just a massive single target nuker, if you can stat him out really well, I think he works in a lot of dungeons because of a more neutral affinity where nothing resists light. So I'm going to put him there. Then finally, we're going to go with Dark. And the Dark is again a single target nuker, but I don't love his kit as much. I'm going to put him in B tier. And I'm going to put him in B tier because his passive is giving him 15 speed increase extra and then 15 more for every buff placed on him in addition. And it doesn't say it caps out. So this little sucker can be moving really, really fast. He's got the same A2 as the tree version where he's ignoring all defense on the enemy. Personally, with such a speed steroid, I would have liked to see the A2 that, say, the Fire and Light one have, where they give themselves the speed increase, because then you're just you're giving yourself the speed increase, but it also scales off with speed, so that you're double dipping. I wonder if the devs didn't do that because they were afraid that might be too much. Where if in theory, when you think about it, you have an infinite, well, I guess however many buffs you can have on somebody, right? In Raid, you can only have 10 buffs on somebody, so it would cap out at 10 stacks. But even at 10 stacks in this game, that means that they're getting 150 free speed. And so if their damage is also scaling off of speed, then, which is 100 plus speed times 1.2. And on the tree, I think it's a little bit higher than that. So I guess maybe that's why they didn't do it. And that's why I'm going to put the Dark Clockwork in B, because he probably, with his A2 ignoring straight up all the defense, I can see a world where he still nukes just fine. Personally, I think he would have been like an S tier single target nuker if his A2 worked like the other one, where he gives himself a speed up and the A2 also scales off of speed. That's just me though, you know, it is what it is. All right, moving on from there, we've come to the Popo riders, and obviously I'm gonna get the easy ones out of the way first. Blue, I kind of see the vision, but I think she's too niche. I'm gonna put her in C. She has an interesting passive where she's putting damage over time every time somebody hits her. But then her A2, she's got a max HP smack, and she's got the blind on her A1, which all of them have. So I guess I can kind of see the vision. You build her, you crit cap her, crit damage, you're going to pump everything else into HP. She's going to do max HP smacks, and then every time she gets hit, she applies the damage over time. I don't think it's a bad kit, but I struggle to see a place where I want her over somebody else. That's all. Fire Popo Rider, I'm gonna put her in A. In a lot of places aside from Boxing Club, she is basically, if you don't have Light Popo Rider, you're using Fire Popo Rider, right? And the difference with the Fire is that she has the decreased speed and the turn meter effect, whereas Light Popo Rider has has two massive smacks, right? One on the A2 and one on the A3. Tree, I'm gonna put an A as well. She's going to be your speed lead for a while. She's gonna be the first speed lead you build, just because Boxing Club's the first dungeon you're really gonna dive into. Boxing Club has some pretty good sets, and yeah, that's what, you know, blind on the A1, attack down and defense down on the A2. Those are two really crucial debuffs for staying alive and dealing more damage. And then on her A3, she's giving everybody speed and turn meter boost. A tier champion. All right, Light Popo Rider, obviously D after the nerf, right? No, I'm just kidding. She's still S tier. And to be fair, it wasn't so much a nerf as I guess she was just broken and she wasn't working as they intended. And I still see teams putting 2 Light Popo Riders and absolutely speed blitzing dungeons. So how could she not be S tier? All right, we've got Dark Popo Rider. Now, I had an interesting conversation with one of my viewers about what her niche is, and I see the niche. I see it. I accept it. I actually think if this game had some kind of, and it might do, and I might be eating my words here a bit. If there was a regeneration set in the game, I could potentially see a world where she is the person, and by regeneration, I mean, you know, she heals herself over time. I could see her being a solo monster. Like, I could see her being like, this is the person you just place into any dungeon team and she can solo it. Now, soloing in Element Fusion, and maybe I guess it worked this way in Summoner's War, is not as important as, you know, it is in Raid, because once you get to a certain point in Raid, you're double dipping, farming food, and, you know, doing a dungeon at the same time. That doesn't seem to be the case in this game, although I could be wrong. I also see the niche where in Arena, she might be able to hard wall certain light enemies by just reducing damage. The problem I feel is that she's just not doing enough in the rest of her kit where someone I think is going to care as much. And what I mean by that is she might be really good against a team that has a bunch of light elements, but if those light elements kill the rest of your team and she's just gonna die regardless because she's not pumping out a ton of damage. She's just a wall, and she doesn't have anything that make walls really good, like say taunts or stuns or anything that really helps there. So she does have the unyield and reflect if she receives fatal damage, but I don't think it's enough for anyone to care where people are going to, you know, I don't think people are going to care much. Now, again, I'm willing to eat my words later on if the meta, especially in PvP, shifts and she's going to be a hard counter to a champion that is super meta, then you know what, I will eat my humble pie. But until then, I think she's C tier, personally. All right, and now we come to the Dome Fighters, and we're going to start with the water one. I'm going to put her in B. I think there is a potential, especially with the fact that she can't get defense down. Her damage increases every time she takes a hit. She has a taunt on her A2 and an A1 that stuns. I think if you put her in 3 retaliate sets where, you know, you're counterattacking, you put the taunt up every time someone hits you. It's basically a 50-50 shot whether or not you hit them back. And then of course there's like when fully booked 60% chance that you stun on a 2-hitter, which means that you're probably going to get that stun. So there is, I think there's a world where there's an interesting build for Dome Fighter to just completely lock an enemy team down and do respectable damage. And she's definitely not a nuker, but I think she can do respectable damage with her passive. Fire Dome Fighter, straight in D. You have a nuke that stuns you, so you lose a turn. I understand that you could probably build a team around that where you have cleansers and stuff so that doesn't matter, but not loving it, not feeling it, don't care. Attack an enemy and damage based on your defense. This is for the tree Dome Fighter. And she's got the defense down and your action bar goes up if you land a crit. I haven't seen anybody using any of the Dome Fighters, but I'm going to go ahead and say that the green Dome Fighter, for different reasons, is probably B tier alongside the blue Dome Fighter, where she just looks like she's a solid choice for a defensive-based nuker who is filling her own turn meters, so she's cycling faster, and she still has the stun on the A1. Light Dome Fighter, I actually think is the best of the bunch because, much like the way that the Water Dome Fighter works, where you are taunting on your A2, stunning on your A1, so if you put a bunch of retaliate sets on, you're probably like, there's a room, an argument to be made for, you know, how good you could be with, you know, essentially like, you know, how much CC can this character pump out, right? Because you're taunting, so on their first turn, they're attacking you, you retaliate, you get the stun off, now that's another, you've already cost somebody 2 turns, right? If you can do that, you know, retaliate, I think fully stacked up is 45%, let's say 50 for argument's sake. So if you're in the tunnel, that means, you know, every 2 to 3 turns, you know, half of the team that you're facing just loses like 2 or 3 meaningful turns. I think she's better than the blue one because her passive just says that incoming damage won't exceed 20% of your max HP, and she grants herself immunity when that effect triggers. So whenever her passive stops more than 20% of her HP, then she is going to also put immunity on herself, which is nice because she can't be debuffed. So I actually think she's the best of that like CC train kind of version of the Dome Fighters you can get. I have one. I am looking forward to building her out, but I think the biggest thing for her, and maybe I can make an argument for dropping her to B, is that this is all predicated on the idea that you have a really good retaliate set, or like you have 6 really good retaliate pieces, and the RNG is kind of in your favor, averaging out, right? Finally, we have the dark one, and the dark one is actually really hard for me to understand. So I understand that basically whenever she uses an ability, there's a, it'll also hit an additional enemy. So basically all of her abilities read, this is going to hit 2 enemies, right? So interestingly enough, on her wild pitch, okay, she attacks an enemy, inflicts 2 turn defense down, and then increases your action bar by 50% if it lands as a crit, right? So this is very much like the tree version is kind of got some like nuker style abilities, right? Now, the way I understand this, and I could be wrong, does this mean that if you A2 and it crits, but they're also whenever the ball you throw, so I'm assuming that this is just anytime you use an ability, it's going to hit an additional enemy, but the damage is reduced by 20%. You're not getting a double dip on that turn meter increase, right? Where it's like, you A2 and then immediately get another turn, and then you're going to A1, potentially stun 2 enemies, and then it comes back to your turn, you're A2ing again. Because if that is the case, okay, I'm going to say if that's the case, she's A tier. If that's not the case, I'd put her in C tier. But if it is the case, you know what? Let's pretend that's how it works, where you're basically just getting an immediate turn after your A2. Let's pretend that's the case. I'll put her in A tier because you build her like a nuker and she just starts cycling really fast. She's got the stun on her A1. So even if she's not hitting super duper duper hard, the fact that she's constantly cycling turn, then forget it. I mean, if you put an echo set on her, you know, or you put echo set, a retaliate set. A lot of these guys are really good in retaliate just because you have the stun on the A1, right? So I'm gonna put her in A tier if that's how her kit works. If not, then like I said, I think she's more C tier because her nuking doesn't seem as concentrated as Dome Fighter, Tree Dome Fighter. All right, now moving on from there, we've got the Hog Chefs. Now, Blue Hog Chef, I'm going to put into I think I'm gonna put her into, maybe I'll put her into I'm gonna put her in B tier. I'm gonna put her in B tier because she's really good in heavy metal. She's got the debuff strip and the heal along with the crit dampen. She's giving somebody an extra turn, but it's a single target. And then every time she A1, she's also doing more turn meter filling. She's really good in heavy metal, but I haven't seen almost anybody really using her anywhere else. So that's kind of why I'm leaning towards B tier. Then we have the Fire Popo Rider. She pretty much works exactly like the blue one, except her, instead of an A3 that strips debuffs and heals and puts a crit dampen, at the start of her turn, she's removing 2 debuffs and recovering HP by 10% with the ally with the lowest HP. So this is objectively worse. So I'm gonna put her in C tier because essentially you can't control who this is going to target. And then if you think about how many turns it takes Hog Rider to get back to her turn, right? So she's using this every 3 turns. You're basically getting a better return on investment than Fire Hog Rider getting 3 turns. Then we have Tree Hog Rider, and Tree Hog Rider has her A3 is charge towards the enemy, deplete their action bar. That seems really good. Deal damage equal to the HP you've lost. So the lower HP you have, the more damage you deal. Fill the action bar of all allies if the target gets killed by this attack. Otherwise, you will gain a 1-turn stun. She's going straight into D tier. She's going straight into D tier. Now, I'm sure somebody will argue that in Arena, she's like slept on, and, you know, any kind of PvP, she's slept on. Probably. But I would ask you, what are the chances that there's a Mon that you can get your hands on that will be more consistent and doesn't come with a downside where if your A3 doesn't do what you were hoping it will, you just lose a turn on this person? You know what I mean? So that's my only argument. Then we have Light Popo Rider, Light Hog Chef. Light Hog Chef is doing the exact same thing as all the other ones. A1ing, increasing turn meter. A2 is giving someone an extra turn along with attack up and effect up, which I think is a little bit different from the other ones because I don't think, is it always attack up for the other ones? It is, okay. Just wanted to double check. Her A3 is just a heal and a revive dead allies. I'm going to put her in B tier. The reason I'm putting her in B tier is because I feel like as content becomes released and your consistency, especially if you're free to play or low spend, and your consistency relies on people sometimes dying, I kind of think about it with like my heavy metal team. If I get the entire team to the boss, they do fine. But every once in a while, one of them dies during the waves, And essentially, if they don't make it to the boss, I don't kill the boss. Hog Chef is a good argument for these kind of moments because as is, unless there's something else I'm forgetting, she's the only A3 given to you for free that comes with a revive. And revive can always be nice in PvP. It can be nice in any, pushing content. If you're really struggling, if you don't have some of the pieces that others have for more consistent runs, I think there's a lot of use cases for her. Then we have the Dark Hog Chef. The Dark Hog Chef has the same A2 as the tree one, where she's removing incurable and other random debuff on target ally, recovering the HP, and then granting 1 turn defense up. And then on her A3, she's granting 2 allies speed up, or I'm sorry, she's granting all allies 2 turn speed up, effect up, and then gaining an extra turn. I will be 100% real with you. I'm going to also put her in C because speed up is nice, but we can get that a lot of other places. Effect up is nice, but a lot of times unnecessary. Mostly because, at least for me, unless you're actually building with purpose, and if you are, this is fine. But again, there's also a lot of other people who are going to bring effect up and speed up. And just removing random debuffs on a target, not even all debuffs, but, you're always removing incurable and 1 random debuff on target ally, and then only healing 1 target ally and giving them a 1 turn defense up. It's not enough. I don't think she's very good. So if you love her, I'm sorry. I love you. Now we have the Sharpshooters. So first things first, we've got the water Sharpshooter. I'm going to go ahead and put her into B. I'm going to put her into B because you get her right off the bat. She's the first mon everybody gets. She's an absolutely great campaign farmer. And then maybe you use her a little bit in PvP, but other than that, she's just relegated to being your campaign farmer. Even in some place like, heavy metal, she's not great because you don't care as much about, team ups as opposed to just, keeping debuffs off and keeping buffs off the enemy, stuff like that. To me, the one place she's really good at, and even then she gets outshone later on by another mon on this list. I think she's fine. I think if she's your first 6-star, she's going to get you through Insane just fine. Her passive, giving her an extra turn every time she kills, means that even though it's all single target, you can still get through waves pretty quickly. It's just, she's not impressing me. Fire Sharpshooter is going to go into A. She's good in heavy metal as a turn meter reducer. She's also good in Death Lab as just getting tons of multi-hits, right? Other than that, you can also use her to campaign farm, right? Any of the Sharpshooters, at least the 3 base ones, you can use as campaign farms. And in that regard, I'm going to put the Tree Sharpshooter above the water one. I don't know if a lot of people would do that, but I'm going to do it. I think she doesn't get enough love. She was my first 6-star. She's going to be good as a campaign farmer in a lifesteal set, in campaign in PvP as a single target nuker. Her passive, letting her ignore enemy defense, I think is really good. You name it. I think she's really, and she's going to be your first boxing club DPS before you get someone like a Ninrat or a Bookworm or someone like that, right? So moving on from there, we've got the Light Sharpshooter. The Light Sharpshooter has the debuff removal of the Tree Sharpshooter, which I'd forgotten to mention, but that's another thing that makes her really good, especially in places like Boxing Club and even Arena and stuff like that. She also, on her A3, she has a heal and inability debuff removal. I'm gonna put her in A tier. If it was remove all debuffs, I might put her S tier, but for just inability and some heal along with some turn meter fill, I believe, yeah. We'll put her in A tier. If you want to try and make an argument for S tier, I honestly think I might agree. Just right now in my head, You know, you know what? Yeah, we'll put her in S tier. We'll put her in S tier. I think she can help you. She's definitely really useful when she comes out in heavy metal, Oxen Club as a debuff remover for the, like if you get a glancing hit and someone gets frozen, she's really good there. You know, so I actually think S tier is probably, I think S tier is a fair one. Dark Sharpshooter, the only one that I don't know anything about. She put defense and mark, which is just 25% increased damage. She got the ally team up, and she's got the defense down on her A1. And decreased damage for each debuff on the target. I feel like that reads as a really solid single target nuker for places like any of the dungeons, Colossi, any of the Abyssal dungeons where it's all single target stuff. I think Dark Sharpshooter, her kit reads really, really well. All right, with this, we're about halfway through the list. I hope you guys are still with me here, and I hope I haven't made you guys too angry. All right, I'm doing my best here. Water Turtle Tank. So he's got the 50% turn meter increase with crit up, attacks 3 times, and has a chance of defense down, and then the A1 is the stun. I'm gonna go ahead and put Turtle Tank Water. I'm gonna put him in. I'm gonna put him in B tier. I'm gonna put him in B tier. I think mostly because I think that 50% action bar increase is just absolutely nutty. He's the only one that's doing it. And honestly, a lot of the turtle tanks are going to be rated that, because going down the list, turtle tank, fire turtle tank, I'm going to put in B. He's giving your whole team defense up and stealth, which is also stealth itself is just removing, or it's reducing incoming AoE damage by 15%. So I'll be honest, once people start getting more into Abyssal dungeons and doing Colossi, this guy as just like, this is your option for doing, like keeping your team alive. It's kind of like, for anybody who's watching this who might be a raid player, it's kind of like having like, say, a Taragi. It's almost like having like a Iron Brago kind of, who puts defense and strength in. It's like, it's kind of like that, but basically where you have, this guy is going to cover all of the defense for your team. When those bosses do all AoEs, this is going to be your guy right here, is the fire turtle tank. I think if you want to keep your team super duper tanky, this is your guy right here. Tree turtle tank, I'm putting in A tier. I'm putting him in A tier for one reason and one reason only, but it can be important. On his A3, he's removing 1 debuff from all allies, reducing cooldowns by 1 turn and granting 2 turn speed up. He's the only A3 option you have that is doing a team-wide cooldown reduction. Also applying speed and debuff removal. I think this guy is great, and I'm currently working with him on some bosses. Pairing him with String Maid or Occult Dancer and Light Sorcerer to basically make like a unkillable team. And he is the linchpin for that. Light Tank. I had someone in my comments talk to me about the passive, increasing the max HP of all allies and decreasing the incoming damage of all allies except you by 15%. Basically, they were saying to me that if he had the A2 from the turtle tank or the fire turtle tank, then your passive is basically like not as good because they're not taking hits. And my art, actually, no, I'm gonna put him in C, because the more I'm talking about it, the more I remember why I thought so lowly of him. His A2 has the defense down, and then his A1 has the stun. My argument was that Light Turtle Tank would be S tier if he had the A2 from the fire tank. Here's why. Most bosses outside of even in the dungeons, But let's just say content moving further from there, right? Pretty much 90% of all bosses' kits are all AoE. So imagine he has the A3 where he's increasing the HP of all allies by 10% of his max HP, and then decreasing the damage all allies take except himself by 15%. You then pair that when a boss does an AoE with the defense up, which is 70% defense, and reduction from AoE attacks, right? Basically, the fire turtle tank is, when he's applying stealth, he's basically doing the same thing that light turtle tank is doing with his passive, except instead of 10% of this guy's max HP being given to everybody, you're trading that out for a 2-turn defense up. But imagine if you had all of that. Now, I imagine if I'm thinking about this as a designer, as a game designer, maybe I don't do that because then this champion is too good. They're too good. They're too busted. But if you ask me, do I think Fire Turtle Tank, when people start delving into Abyssal Dungeons and Colossi, do I think people are going to use Light Turtle Tank or Fire Turtle Tank? Well, realistically, they're going to be using more. They're going to be experimenting more with Fire Turtle Tank because he's more accessible. But I think there's a fair argument for both. Truthfully, but I think the Fire Turtle Tank, I think, has more going on, and I just like him. So again, if Light Turtle Tank ends up popping off, well, 1, I'm glad I got one. And 2, listen, I am no afraid to eat some humble pie. I'm not. I am absolutely more than willing to admit when I'm wrong. Just I don't think I'm wrong yet. I don't think there's enough proof to say that I'm wrong yet, but it could come. Then we have the Dark Turtle Tank. When attacked, he's applying block and a 15% chance to apply 1-turn stun. Additionally, your chance of receiving a critical hit is reduced by 50%. This effect cannot stack. He's applying a single target taunt and a stun on an A1. I'll be honest, I'm gonna put him in C tier as well. Here's why. This seems really good at face value for PvP because bosses don't care about being stunned, right? There's some argument to make about the block when it comes to heavy metal. I don't think you can block the protective scales in Death Lab. I've tried, I haven't gotten it to work. I don't know if it's because debuffs weren't timed properly, but it's one of those things where it's like you really want him to be hit, but aside from one single target taunt, which doesn't even affect bosses, even in arena and stuff like that, I just don't think that his kit, I don't know. He really wants to be hit. He wants people to hit him, but he's only got a single target taunt to force people to hit him. So, again, this is another one. Maybe I'll eat some humble pie later on. You know what I mean? All right, and now we are on to the Occult Dancers. I'm going to try and get through these faster. Water Occult Dancer, I think, is I'm gonna be honest with you, she's C tier. I might even make her D tier. Her passive is the biggest, most interesting thing she's got going for her, but it's a 4-turn cooldown that basically says whenever she gets crit or an ally loses 50% of their HP, she puts like a 30% shield on them, right? And it's 26%, and it's of her max HP. If there was no cooldown on that passive, I'd be like, wow, this looks really good. It's a 4-turn cooldown on that passive. I'm gonna be honest. Other than that, not good. Not good. Fire Occult Dancer, I'm putting her into A tier. And the reason why is because she brings something in the Nat 3s that nobody else brings, and that is debuff or buff extension. On her A2, she extends the duration of buffs and shortens the duration of debuffs for 1 turn on all allies and recovers 20% of their HP. This is really nice, and this is another linchpin where, again, with Light Sorcerer, I was thinking Occult Dancer, but I think String Maid for what I'm going for is actually more useful, but not everybody can count on having Water String Maid. Chances are you will pull a Fire Occult Dancer, and so while I don't know exactly how much you're going to care about extending buffs right now, as people are just working through, still like leveling up and getting through the basic dungeons, I think the design space, the fact that she's the only one, it's the same reason why Tree Turtle Tank got here, is because at the Nat 3 spot, they're the only two that bring that effect, that are accessible. So A tier. And then in B tier, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to put the Tree Occult Dancer. She's fine. She's not egregious. She's bringing a healing over time and a 3-turn shield. The shield is equal to your levels. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but, or it's 52 times your levels. So I guess it'd be 52 times 60. So, you know what, like 300. No, I'm doing math wrong, but you get what I'm saying. She's got the A2 where she's removing all harmful effects and granting a 1 stack of Nullify. Again, you're going to build her for Boxing Club, and then eventually she's probably somebody that gets phased out. But early on, she's really good for that. And I have seen quite a few Occult Dancers in PvP that are really annoying. If they get a turn, and now mind you, this is because I'm lucky enough to have a light music queen, so I can lock her out. If you don't have lockout and you don't nuke fast enough, she's just constantly putting shields and heals on the enemy team. So I think she deserves a B slot. All right, moving on from there, we're gonna go to the Bouncing Joker, the blue one. He is really, really good for, we'll put him in B tier. He is excellent for early heavy metal teams because he just does a lot of buff strip. And that's really what you care about, is getting a lot of buff strip out. The fire one, we've got, I haven't really seen much from him, but I think he's pretty standard in Death Lab, right? Where he's bringing attack up on everybody. He's putting Incurable, which is really important because one of the totems heals the boss for like 50% of his HP, which is absolutely insane. So having the Incurable is nice. He also has an A2, which is just a 2-hitter, and then has a chance to drum repeat his, to repeat the attack. And so when you're trying to get through the protective scales, that's really nice. Same thing with the Tree Joker. The Tree Joker, much like all the other ones, he's B tier because he's going to be on your team until you find something better. But when you need him in the beginning, pretty much all the 3 Jokers are they're going to wind up in the 3 respective dungeons, right? Tree Joker is really good for Boxing Club, granting you effect up, which is accuracy, and giving you resistance. And that resistance on all allies is really nice to prevent getting frozen if you get a glancing hit on the boss. He's also bringing defense down. He's also bringing a crit dampen so that the boss has less potential to crit. And he's bringing a heal. So, and an attack down on his A1. So again, all 3 of these Bouncing Jokers, when you're kind of building up the battle plan of your first dungeon teams, getting through the early stages, these 3 are going to wind up in every single positive affinity team. Light Joker, I know nothing about, but it looks like attacking targets without buffs or with debuffs is always going to be a critical hit. This is nice because this allows you some design space in terms of, okay, if the target is with debuffs or without buffs, so either or, right? So if you can put a debuff on something and he brings an attack down on his A1, he's also bringing heals and crit dampen on his A2, he's going to be able to consistently damage, and he's an interesting design space because it means you don't need to put crit on him. So you could, in theory, stack him with attack percentage and crit damage with no crit rate, and he would hit like a truck. I'm gonna put him in B just because I don't really know much about him. And it seems like one of those things where there's probably people who are going to be single target nuking better than him, but I see the vision. All right. And finally, the Dark Bouncing Joker. He's got the same A2 as the Fire one. He's got the same A1 as everybody else. He has this really funny, interesting passive where if he gets crits can't kill him. And he also gives the enemy crit. There's a tunnel stage where there's 3 of them. And I remember asking myself, there's nothing in the passive that says that doesn't stack. And so I assume it does stack. And so here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to put him. Okay. Hear me out. I'm putting him in D tier. If you have one of him, it's probably going to make your team's life a living hell because the entire enemy squad is going to have 30% more crit. That might not crit cap anybody. And then they're just going to use that crit to kill your whole team. However, if the passives stack like it says they do, and you have 3 or 4 of them, that is that is the most annoying looking arena defense I can think of. Because if you don't have a way to turn off passives, you literally can never kill them. It's also the same thing with, like, in theory, having like 3 bouncing jokers on a team, on any dungeon team, probably means you slowly but surely can kill your way through pretty much anybody. Certain places like Death Lab is tough because you need some heal reduction. But other than that, putting him in D tier. But he is funny, and I do like memes, and I get it. I get people like memes. Please don't be mad at me. But I think other than that, I don't think he's good. I think he's absolutely a meme, and I don't think he's meant to be good. All right, now we get to the giants. Water Giant, B. His passive is damage reduction, so if a hit is less than 25% of your hit points, then it's reduced by half, and it also makes it so that he's taking reduced damage by half of AoE attacks, which is a lot of bosses. His A2 is just healing allies by his max HP, and then when he's 6-starred, it gives them a defense up. And then his A1 is a smack based off of his max HP and adds a taunt. So he's pretty milquetoast. He's just tanky, and he's going to give your team heals and defense up. But sometimes that's just what you need. So I'm going to put him in B tier. I think it's an unoffensive, basic milquetoast kit that just looks fine. On the fire one, your A3 is attacking 5 times. Each attack has a 40% chance to ignore target's defense and then damage based on your defense. So we've got a defensive based nuker. His A2 is the same as the water ones, where it's a heal, but when he's 6-starred, it's bringing debuff removal instead of defense up. I will be honest, I think his kit would be much better if it was a defense up. And because of that, I'm putting him in C tier. Because one thing that makes him, like, okay, this might be a raid thing. This might be a raid thing, and I'm willing to accept it. But like, a lot of the best nukers in raid bring stuff for themselves. And I don't mean like the top tier, because a lot of the top tiers are just like, no, these guys just hit really, really hard. But a lot of like A tier and S tier nukers in raid bring their corresponding buff, whether it be attack, giving themselves attack up, giving themselves extra crit damage, stuff like that. So the fact that his A2 is a debuff removal instead of a defense up, and he's the defensive nuker, I'll be honest, I think if you swap the water and the fire giants A2s, I think there's an argument that both of them could go a little bit higher. Personally, I think they could both, like, Fire Giant might even be able to go into A tier. But again, this is me trying to apply raid logic to not a raid game that is obviously much more like Summoner's War, and that's why I did this. Tree Giant, we've got increase the action bar of all allies by 20%, also grant them 2-turn attack up and defense up on a 4-turn cooldown. So almost as good as Steel Wings, because I think it's better to have a 3-turn on a 4-turn cooldown than have the action bar, because you're still going to find yourself in like 2 turns of not having that buff, right? On the A1, you've got a big smack, and it applies a stun if it crits. So he's kind of basing himself also like an HP based nuker. He is bringing his own. He's kind of bringing his own buffs. I mean, he still scales off attacks. So I'm gonna say B tier. I'm gonna say B tier. Light Giant, recover the HP of all allies by 20% of your max HP if you land a critical hit on your turn. Healing amount will be halved if not on your turn. Attack an enemy if this attack lands as a critical hit. Applies a stun. Damage based on your max HP. And your A1 is also damage based on max HP. I'm gonna be honest. I kind of want to put I kind of want to put A tier. And I'm putting him A tier because when I read his kit, it's saying, okay, every time you crit, you're healing. And all of your kit wants to work off of you stacking HP and crit, and your passive wants you to stack. It's a kit where I read left to right, right to left, and everything looks like it's working together. A lot of times, some of these guys, the reason I didn't rate them higher is because their kit looks a little discombobulated. That just might be my raid player brain though. I don't know. And we've got the Dark Giant. I'm gonna be honest, Dark Giant S tier. I mean, really off his A3 alone. 50% action bar decrease, and then if it fully depletes, it stuns. There's a lot of cases where that A3 basically gives you like a two-turn lead on an enemy team, whether it be wave-based content, tunnel, PvP. You know, obviously for bosses, they can't be stunned, but a lot of bosses can have their turn meter reduced. So even then, yeah, and then of course, he's recovering all HP of your allies by his max HP. And when he's 6-starred, it's adding a speed up, which speed is it's probably, I would imagine Raid being a knockoff of Summoner's War, right? Summoner's War is the granddaddy, so Raid came later on. Speed's important in Raid. If speed's important in Raid, it's got to be important in Summoner's War. And if Summoner's War, then Element Fission, you see the line that I'm following with that, right? So, with 50% turn meter reduction on a 3-turn cooldown, if it depletes, they get stunned. Then you're speeding yourself up. You're healing. He's S tier. He's just S tier. And moving on from there, Water Garolian, also S tier. He's bringing all of the debuffs, attack down, speed down. He's buff stripping. He's defense downing, attack, speed, defense. He also puts incurable. He also is buff stripping. There's literally not a place where you want that many debuffs, or there's not a place where you don't want that many debuffs. And, he's a great campaign farmer, right? Like he's kind of a standard campaign farmer. He's like baby water sorcerer. He doesn't clear as fast as water sorcerer. He needs some more items unlike water sorcerer, but it's kind of the same idea. He's just bringing a ton of AoEs. But one thing when I see people talk about Water Garolian is, dude, his kit is bringing so much, and it's all good. Attack down, speed down. The guy, like, Water Garolian's insane. He's bringing all 3 of like your standard good debuffs. Attack down, defense down, speed down. I could ramble on, but I don't know. His kit is just so overloaded. This guy is in Raid. This guy could be a legendary, and people would be falling over themselves to try and pull him. That's all I'm saying. Fire Garolian. He also looks like a solid support, but I'm gonna put him in A tier. I'm putting him in A tier just because 30% action bar up with attack up, immunity and heals on his A2, and then the incurable on the A1. I put him in A tier. I'm thinking about where would I want that. And the problem is Death Lab, that seems nice, but he doesn't have a multi-hitter. no, I think his kit just still has a lot going. Like, it's a really, really solid support kit. So, you know what? I've kind of talked myself out of it. I'm gonna put him in B. Still super solid looking support kit. Then we have Tree Garolian. He's bringing the 2-turn hit, or the 2-hitter AoE defense down, incurable on the A1. He has this really interesting passive where he's immune to defense down, and basically if he starts getting attacked by a certain attribute, if it's the same as the one that hit him before, you begin reducing it by all the damage by 50%. So this guy has a potential to be really, really tanky. I'm gonna put him in C tier though, because aside from the defense down, you're really tanky, but like, so what? What are you doing with that tank? You know what I mean? I mean, if you were really, really tanky and say your A2 was a taunt, okay, now we have a conversation. But you're bringing defense down and incurable, and then you're just making yourself super tanky. It's, yeah, I don't know. Doesn't wow me. On to the Light Garolian. When an attack lands as a critical hit, there is a 70% chance to apply 1 turn of stun. If the enemy is immune to inability effects or already under inability effects, your attack will absorb 20% of the action bar, recover HP to all allies equal to 20% of the damage dealt. So, got a bit of a DPS healer, much like Light Giant. A2, same thing. He's applying defense down on an AoE, but if he crits, there's a chance that also becomes an AoE stun and defense down, and then incurable on the A1. I'm gonna put him in B tier because his kit does look better, but it's not blowing me away, right? Because it's one of those things where there's some percentages going on. You might get a little bit unlucky. And then if you're not getting that stun, which is also, then, if you're hitting someone who's already stunned, you're not getting the heal. So it looks solid, but it doesn't blow me away in a way where it's like, I absolutely I need to find a place to put that guy, right? And especially, like I said, because I don't know, when I'm making this tier list, I don't know if a lot of people have realized it, but once you get your dungeon team set, and they are important, and I'm sure there's going to be people who'll be like, hey, Water Garolian, help me through, stage 10 Vegas. Hey, fair enough. But moving on from there, all the content that's going to be important after everybody gets their dungeon team set is all going to be single target bosses who are going to be immune to a lot of this stuff. I mean, I guess he's still getting the heal for the damage, right? But then the question is, outside of that, he's just bringing defense down and incurable, right? And so it's like, is there a way I could put a team together that is better at healing and putting defense down than having Light Garolian? I don't know. Again, kit looks solid, not blowing me away. Then we have Dark Garolian. Dark Garolian really does one thing, but it looks like he could potentially do it really well. And he is a single target nuke. On his A3, which scales 560% of his attack. This skill ignores all buffs on the target, and each buff on the target increases damage by 30%. Target killed by the skill cannot be revived. And it's also applying a incurable, but the purpose of this is that the incurable doesn't matter because you just want this to one-tap somebody, right? So in PvP, he's also restoring HP and granting immunity to allies, and then incurable again on his A1. The A3 is a 4-turn cooldown, but there is ways around that. I'm gonna put Dark Garolian. Man, I feel like if I put him in C tier, people are going to be really upset. This is my tier list. I'm putting him in C. That's not because I don't see the vibes. I don't think. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not seeing it. I mean, I am seeing it. It's just, I need to see more of it. Again, this is another one of those, I'll eat the humble pie. If he becomes the best nuker in the game, then I was wrong. Is what it is. My bad. All right, and last up, we are on to the Pumpkin Freaks. Let's just get these right out the way. Water Pumpkin Freak is B tier. He seems pretty solid for early heavy metal. He's bringing defense down, speed down, and buff removal on his A2, which is very important. On his A1, he's also bringing defense down. And then when attacking the enemy, apply 2 turns of block, which is going to block debuff removal effect once and can't be applied with buffs. And then after receiving a multi-hit attack, reduce the duration of all your debuffs and by 1 turn and counterattack with your A2. So I don't think the bosses will trigger that passive. Well, they won't trigger the second portion of the passive, but the first portion of the passive is just when you're attacking the enemy, you're applying block. Block can also be very useful for heavy metal. So again, he's going to be an early candidate for heavy metal shenanigans. Fire Pumpkin Freak. I will be honest. He's got some multi-hitters. He's also bringing defense down, speed down. And on his A3, he's applying poisons. He's attacking all enemies 2 times and inflicting 3 turn damage over turn on everybody. He is basically like the counterpart. He's very similar again to the water Clockwork, where he's just applying AoE poisons. I will be honest with you, I don't think I'm gonna put him in B tier because I think he also has a place in Death Lab until you get a better version. I'll speak about that when I get there. Water Clockwork, I think in terms of putting AoE poisons is better, and here's why, is because if this works the way it does in Raid, placing cannot weak hit a place, whereas he could weak hit. So that means even if you're in an unfavorable affinity matchup with Water Clockwork, you're still going to get the 2 poisons because he's just placing them, whereas he is hitting the enemy. And so if he's weak hitting, you get a glancing hit. It doesn't seem like debuffs get placed on glancing hits. So I think he gets to stay in B tier just because well, we're gonna put him C tier. We're gonna put him C tier. He has a place in Death Lab, but even then, I think you could find other people to place into Death Lab to do the same thing. And I just love Water Clockwork. I mean, come on, look at him. He's just a little guy. He's just a little guy. Green Tree, D tier. I think he's bad. I just think he's bad, and I don't want to talk about it. Because when I first read, you know how when you first read a kit and you're reading what you want to see and not what's really existing in reality? When I did that, I was like, oh my God, this guy looks insane. Then I actually read through his kit and it's like, okay, his A3 gets a 30% crit penalty and, you know, it inflicts a stun and it ignores defense, but it doesn't crit. It's based off your max HP. Then he's removing all debuffs and placing a shield, but then it's only on 1 ally. It's just, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's just, his kit just doesn't look good. Light Pumpkin Freak is, I'm gonna put him in B tier. He is a good ally attacker. He's a good ally attacker. His A3 is much like, or his A2 is much like the water version, where he's defense down, speed down, and buff strip. He's also on his A3 applying 3 turns of Incurable, which is also useful for Death Lab, and then attacking with 1 to 3 other allies who have the highest attack power. The number of selected allies based on your attack power. What I understand, you need to get this guy to like 3k attack for all of those allies to join in. And if you can't do that, then his ally attack is not as good. But in Death Lab specifically, and I would argue, no, I think just Death Lab. I see a lot of people use him in Death Lab, and I don't see a lot of people use him outside of there. Same thing with Dark Pumpkin Freak. He's apparently the best arena speed lead in the game. Now, I'm assuming it's because of how fast he is. Because his base speed is 114. If you stack him, he goes up to 119. And so he's like one of the fastest champions in the game, I believe. I could be wrong at the time, because I think he's the fastest because you can stack him easier than you can stack someone else, especially like LD, like, you know, like nat 5s and stuff, right? He's granting 2 turns to allies of effect up and resistance up, which is nice, especially for arena, because, you know, you want to be able to hit certain accuracy breakpoints to actually get your abilities to land. And then he's recovering 24% HP. Additionally, increase the action bar based on the percentage of overhealing. So it's interesting because it's not as much action bar as, say, a water turtle tank, but I think the idea is that in a perfect world, water turtle tank can never outspeed Pumpkin Freak. And so that's why you pretty much always bring Pumpkin Freak as the speed lead. So you're not getting as much turn meter boost, but you're trading off for the fact that this guy is just like, he's just goofy amounts of fast. Then you're removing all debuffs from target ally and applying a shield, and then the defense down the A1. Again, it's one of those things where I can kind of see other use cases, but again, I only ever really think about him when I think about PvP. And so that's kind of why I don't have him in A tier, or I can't think of putting him in A tier, because it's like outside of arena and maybe guild airship, but it's, I mean, that seems to be a whole different meta that people are trying to figure out. And it definitely seems like it's very distinct, where people who are good in guild arena or guild airship wars are not as good in arena, and vice versa. And so I'm going to put him in B tier. It's mostly because he's really, really good at one specific thing, but it doesn't seem like he has much, what would you say? He doesn't have as much utility elsewhere, right? All right, guys. Well, that's the video. That is the tier list. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Did I snub your favorite Mon? Do you think I'm spot on? I think that this is a pretty good fair spread of top and bottom end, right? We have a few people in S tier, a few people in D tier, and vice versa. So, like I said, let me know what you think in the comments below. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that fancy YouTube stuff. It really means a lot to me how much love you guys have been showing the channel. And if you could keep it up, I would really appreciate that. Other than that, like I said, we're looking towards a stream schedule. I'm not exactly sure when that'll be, but, you know, keep an eye out for that if you want to see me stream daily. Other than that, guys, that's been my tier list. I've been Titus. That's all for me for now, and I'll see you guys next time.